The thing I'm most proud of when I was president for Local 63 was the organizing of the superintendents. Hands down, that was the most rewarding thing that we did while I was in office. Not just for them, but what we did for their families. Hands down, that was absolutely the best thing.
Paul Kevin Trani is a former president of Local 63 of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, the ILWU. Paul comes from a long line of longshore workers, which started with his great-grandfather, who immigrated from Italy with his wife.
From my knowledge, when they came from Italy into Ellis Island, they worked their way into California, and at one time he used to work for Sun Lumber Company. And then he went to work longshoring.
My great-grandfather started down here, and then my grandfather, Paul Vincent, and then my dad, Paul Vernon, and then myself, Paul Kevin. I say our middle names because we all have Paul, and so at home we kind of go by our middle names, but down the waterfront we're all Pauls.
The ILWU is more than a union. It's a family. We grew out of hard times. And through hard times, we grew together. We learned to respect one another. We worked hard together. There was no tolerance for people not doing the job. We depended on one another for safety to get the job done. So we became a family. And then through those particular years, there was sponsorships that were available. And family begot family.
My dad was a hard worker. He'd take any job he can get. But he preferred working the lumber boats, the lumber barges. That was the lumber boats that came in, most of them from Northern California and Oregon, bringing lumber down. Plus, there was lumber boats that came from Europe also. And that was the lumber that was being used to build homes.
Paul's father sponsored him to enter the ILWU. However, when his son graduated from high school, sponsorship was no longer permitted, but he was able to help him find a non-union job on the docks.
My dad was able to get me a job as a non-union vessel planner for marine terminals at the time. And that's how I got my foot in the door, and that was in 1983. And I kind of bounced around from non-union to docks to different docks, Metropolitan Stevedore, Marine Terminals Corporation, ITS. So I bounced around.
Although Paul was grateful to have a good job on the waterfront, the lack of security in the job was a challenge, especially while raising a young family with his wife, Lori.
Once you got laid off, you go home and you just wait until there's another job opening someplace else. When I got laid off, I was home for, I want to say 5 months I was laid off, and I was just trying to pick up part-time work here and there. So there was 5 months with no medical benefits. There was no pay coming in. So it was a good job while you had it, but once you got laid off, you had nothing.
At the time that Paul was moving from job to job, Jim Spinoza became president of ILWU Local 63. This was a period when new technologies were beginning to threaten longshore jobs. Spinoza believed that the M&M agreement should be the template for how to deal with these new technologies. In the 1960s, as containerization revolutionized longshore work, the M&M agreement guaranteed that dock workers would be included in any new jobs that emerged.
That was the scope of the M&M agreement, was always that, yes, we'll work with technology with you, but you have to bring us along with the technology. They weren't bringing us along, they were shutting us out. And they were moving in a direction that we had to open those doors for ourselves. Vessel planning and the yard planning and the rail planning were job categories that we needed. Organizing's tough. It was management, we had to go get it. We had to have many, many secret meetings, and it was very stressful for me, especially in that particular situation, because people would lose their jobs. And there were people in there that were not well. They had various sicknesses. Wives may have been having babies coming, and mortgages and everything else that goes along with losing your job. So yes, the stress on me and the stress at that particular time was very, very tough. There were many nights I didn't sleep.
Paul was part of the group that was being organized by Spinoza, And the urgency for the workers to win their struggle was compounded for him because it was his wife, Lori, that was pregnant with their third child during this stressful period.
When I got laid off the first time, we were pregnant. My wife was pregnant with our first child, and I got laid off. So here we are, fast forward a few years, and my wife's pregnant with our third child, and we're talking about going to the Marine Clerks Local. So it was a little bit on the edge of your seat, hoping that this was going to go through and nothing would happen, because me and my wife both knew what happened when our first daughter, Brittany, was born.
Fortunately for Paul, the workers won their battle and they were able to enter into the ILWU. The victory came just in the nick of time for Paul and his family.
I got to go visit my wife at the hospital and show her the contract that I just signed and told her she can call her employer and quit her job and stay home with our baby.
And that probably was one of the best days of our lives. We would be able to have me quit my job and be able to take care of her. And thank God for the union, because again, we had the best insurance, and everything was covered through, the union, and it gave me a sense of relief to know that, I didn't have to be concerned with that.
When Baylee was born, she was born at 1 pound, 12 ounces, and she was literally from my tip of my middle finger to right where my wrist is. That's how big she was. That was a very, very stressful time, because you've got your daughter that's born, not knowing if she's gonna live tomorrow or today, and every day was going up and down.
The percentage of her making it, they told me she had 80% chance of not making it. And she was in there 86 days in NICU. We almost lost her 3 times during that time period.
All the nurses and doctors would tell my parents, like, oh, she's a fighter. And my grandma on my mom's side would tell my mom that she's a fighter and, like, it's a miracle. She's a miracle baby.
Paul and Lori's daughter, Baylee, is a Division I women's college hockey player at the Rochester Institute of Technology in New York. She is the first hearing-impaired player in the team's history. Although that is quite an accomplishment, it truly is a miracle that Baylee could play at any level.
As she got older, we realized that she had so much fire in her that she was going to accomplish everything that her brother and sister could accomplish who were older than her. And at 4 years old, she told us that she wanted to play roller hockey.
I remember my parents were like, "You sure you want to play? Like, you're so small and dainty. Like, no, I don't want you to get hurt." I'm like, "No, I want to play. I want to play what my sister and brother are doing." And so they let me play. And then I started when I was 4, and then we all transitioned over to ice hockey about a year and a half later. So I started on my first travel team when I was 6, and I played on an 8 and under team.
Going to the hockey practices and hockey games for us, you're spending all that time in the car with your kid in the passenger seat, and you're just talking about stuff. You're talking about games, life lessons. You're talking about school. It's just the time. The ILWU gives you the opportunity to spend a lot of time with your family.
All 3 of our children, played a travel sport. We had 3 different travel teams going on at once, not including, normal high school things that they're doing and field trips. And, being with the ILWU, he had the liberty of being able to work, hours where he was able to make those, daytime trips.
It was really important for my dad to be there, and he definitely helped me grow as a person and a player on the ice. And my mom, too, like both my parents they had that flexibility, and it's heartwarming for me to play for them a little bit longer. So it's really nice to have that flexibility.
In 2016, Paul campaigned for and was elected president of Local 63 of the ILWU. Ironically, he was now the leader of the union side of an organizing effort of workers on the docks. This time, the struggle focused on waterfront superintendents.
It was during that time where we organized a lot of the superintendents on the dock. And I got to share my story with those guys and explain to them how it's just like a big full circle that's come around, that I was sitting in their shoes once before, that when I got into the Marine Clerks Local back in '98, and here we are, I'm president of Local 63, and now I'm helping to organize them.
Tim Campbell was one of the workers that wanted to get into the ILWU through the organizing efforts.
It wasn't even a very big decision for me. I knew right away, this is what I want. I had a terrible past. I was in a lot of gangs, gang violence, in and out of bad situations. And getting into ILWU was like a huge deal for me, because I knew if I got fired or laid off from this company, I'm not going anywhere else, you know? And then when the union came about, I was like, wow, okay, I'll do anything, you know? I'll give my life for this.
We met secretly with those guys because they had a tremendous fear that if the companies found out, that they'd get fired. And it was difficult for us too, because you never want to put anybody in a situation where they're going to lose a job. We cared more about these individuals than a lot of the companies cared about them, because they would have just fired them. Yeah, it was very stressful. There was a lot of nights where I just couldn't sleep. If we were going to meet the next day, it was very, very stressful.
During that time, 5 different companies laid off. I think there was a total of 30 or 35 superintendents just because of that situation. And that's what we were scared of, because they could promise you anything. But reality is that they'll lay you off tomorrow so you don't mess up the company. That was another thing I loved about how Paul was, because he was straightforward with me the entire time, because he knew how much it meant to me. And he knew that if I lose, I'm going back to nothing, you know? So when me and him talked all the time, and he said, Tim, I'm just being really honest with you, man. If you lose, you're probably gonna lose your job. If you win, you know how it is with the ILWU.
After a long and stressful battle to join the ILWU, a majority of the superintendents voted to enter the union. Tim and his colleagues were now members of ILWU Local 63.
Individuals like Tim, their lives are changed forever now. It was great. It was a great feeling. I was so thankful to be a part of that.
It was a crazy situation. And I mean, it's stressful, but I'll do that stress 1,000,000 times over to be where I am today. 100%. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your views are on the union or not. You get in to ILWU, you're golden.
The union has meant the world to my family. It's given us everything. It's helped given us our health because of the great medical benefits we have. It's given us time to spend with each other. All the joy I have in my life is because the ILWU allowed me to get it.